Darla to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Heather. My name is Darla Bardine. I'm the Executive Director of the National Network for Youth, and I use she, her pronouns. So happy to have you join us today.
Excellent. We're just working on getting our slides up, but in the meantime, if everyone could just go ahead and drop their name, pronouns, title, where they're joining from today, and an emoji to reflect how their day is going. We would love that, just so we can all kind of see who else is on, and especially for the purposes of our call today, it'll be nice for you to see who else from your state is on here today. Awesome. So I see some people dropping where they're from in the chat. We've got James from Oklahoma, Nicole from Oregon, Kelly from Ohio, Josh from California, Melanie from Washington, got Kirsten from Michigan. Awesome. Got people from all over. And so far for our Hill Day this year and our summit in general, we have folks registered from over, I think, 36 or 37 states so far. So really exciting that we're going to have so many folks from all over the country joining us in DC to advocate for policies to prevent and end youth homelessness. So let's see who else. We have Tristan from Florida, Jessica from Kansas, Marnie from California. We've got Jacqueline from Connecticut. Jacqueline, I went to college in Connecticut. Shout out. Worked in Bridgeport for a while. We got Lauren from Washington, D.C., Tara from Texas. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to have you all here with us today. I think we're going to go ahead and get started on account of we have a lot to go over in a short amount of time. So as folks continue to join, feel free to continue to introduce yourself in the chat. So today we'll just be going over, have a brief intro, go over scheduling and preparing for your Hill meetings, effective advocacy strategies, our congressional asks for Hill Day, and then any questions you might have. So just a little bit about the National Network for Youth. The National Network for Youth is on a mission to transform systems so that no young person in America experiences homelessness. We're a membership-based organization with members from all over the country who provide services to youth and young adults experiencing homelessness. We also have a very powerful youth advocacy committee who we work with. And yeah, our network holds this summit every year. The goal of the summit is to just have our voices heard on Capitol Hill so that we can get more policies passed to prevent and end youth homelessness. So as you see, our work includes federal policy and advocacy, youth and young adult partnerships, and community-based solutions. Awesome. If we can go to the next slide. Cool. So one of our primary focuses today is to talk about how you're going to go about scheduling and preparing for your Hill meetings, which will be taking place on March 1st during the summit. So as I mentioned, Hill Day will be taking place March 1st, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We're so excited for this opportunity to have y'all meet with your congressional representatives. So when you're scheduling your meetings, we're gonna request to have the member of Congress present. It's not uncommon, though, that they have a staffer of theirs attend the meeting in their place, just as their calendars obviously are very packed. So the person that you are meeting with might not be available during the 9 to 12 p.m. slot. So it is common for folks to have their meetings on other days and times during our summit. So that's okay, as long as other members of your group are also available during that time. For virtual attendees, please also schedule your meetings. And, everything for our virtual attendees is basically going to be the same in terms of scheduling these meetings, other than the fact they're going to, of course, be on Zoom rather than in person. Again, for our virtual attendees, it can be any time during the week of summit. Also, you can obviously do it after, before, or after summit, preferably. But we just recommend trying to schedule during the summit, since you probably already have these times blocked off on your calendar. For these meetings, we'll have paper materials for our in-person folks, including our fact sheets, our section by sections, and list of endorsing organizations for the relevant policies that we'll be advocating for. For our virtual attendees, we will send you PDFs of all those materials, and you'd also be able to find them on our website as well. And so for our Hill Day meetings, for states that have more than 3 people currently registered, we're trying to identify state captains for those places. The state captain's role will be to coordinate the Senate meetings for all of the registrants in their state. So shout out to our state captains that we have identified so far. Thank you all so much. You'll see the names of our state captains right here on the right. So we've got Beth from Minnesota, Cheyenne from Oregon, Marnie from Pennsylvania, Jolie from Wisconsin, Ted from Illinois, Kirsten from Michigan, Amy from Oklahoma, and Josh from California. Thank y'all so much again for agreeing to be our state captains this year. We greatly appreciate your help. If you don't see your state listed up here and you have interest in being a state captain, please go ahead and email me. There is a chance that your state just doesn't have enough folks registered in order to require a state captain. That being said, even if there's only a couple of people in your state, if you want to spearhead scheduling the meetings, you're more than welcome to do so. Like I said, just please reach out to me. Once the Senate meetings are scheduled, the state captain will schedule a prep meeting with all the registrants from their state. So after we get off of this webinar, I'll connect all of you with your state captains, and then your state captain will get started on scheduling those Senate meetings and scheduling a prep call with all of you before the meetings are scheduled. And then just for your awareness, your state captains are not responsible for scheduling meetings with all of your House representatives. Obviously, you might be from the same state, but you might have different state representatives. So we are encouraging everyone to go ahead and schedule their House meeting with their representative and invite others from their state who are in the same district to join. So I would recommend once I connect you all on an email chain, that can be something that you determine together, whether or not you're in the same district and have the same representatives. Maybe in that initial introduction email, you might respond and obviously give your availability for the prep meeting, as well as maybe include who your state representative is, kind of so that people can start getting an idea of whether they have the same representatives. All right, we can go ahead to the next slide. So for scheduling your meetings, so if you are in a state that you don't have a state captain, just to give you an idea of how you go about scheduling your meetings, or if you are the state captain and you're just kind of new to the process. So you're going to start off by identifying who your state senators are and your House representative. You can call or email to schedule a meeting. It's really up to you which of these you want to do. But if you're like, well, I don't know how to get in touch via call or email, you're going to start off by going to the Senator or House Representative's website. Usually, if you scroll to the bottom or at the top, you'll find a place on the website where it says contact us. So you're going to go there and you should be able to find a phone number or an email, or sometimes they have a web form for scheduling a meeting. So just go ahead and look there. If you have trouble finding contact information, of course, you're welcome to reach out to me and I'm happy to get you the contact information. So you're going to want to specify whether the meeting is in person or virtual. For our folks who are joining us in DC, it's going to be in person. For our folks joining virtually, that's going to be via Zoom or Google Meet. Ask for the elected official to join. That being said, don't be discouraged if they're unable to join. It's still incredibly important to have the meetings, even if it's with their staffers. Their staffers will, have a good read on whether or not their boss will support the legislation based on, or the asks based on their knowledge, and they will still relay the information to their boss. Be clear about what you would like the meeting to be about. So Darla will go over our priorities later on during this webinar, but just make sure when you are scheduling the meeting, you have kind of a list of what you're hoping to discuss with them. And we can go to the next slide. Awesome. So just some tips. Research who you're meeting with and kind of get an idea of what their policy priorities are. Usually you can find information about that on their website. Prepare talking points, assign roles, and have an agenda. So we have a draft agenda for you. So when you do have that prep meeting prior to Hill Day, you can talk over that draft agenda. You and your state captain will go ahead and fill out that agenda with the rest of the members from your team. When we say assign roles, we kind of mean like if there's going to be someone who kicks the meeting off and does introductions or starts off introductions, assign roles to make sure that there's someone at the end who makes the solid ask again. For example, if you're asking them to co-sponsor the runaway and homeless the RHY TPA, then you're going to have someone at the end ask them like directly and clearly, hey, can we count on you to co-sponsor this legislation? Plan for a 15-minute meeting, but be prepared for the meeting to take 30 minutes. We recommend you taking notes if they say anything or if they have any questions in particular that you don't feel like you can answer. Make sure to make note of that so that Darla or I could follow up with them to answer their question. And if you are going to be meeting virtually, make sure you have good internet connection. We can go ahead to the next slide. Awesome. So as I mentioned, we will provide a draft meeting agenda. It's going to be linked in the slides, which we'll be sharing with you after the webinar. And yeah, so for the draft agenda, we just go through it here briefly, but you're going to thank the member for meeting with you, do introductions, give information about your organization and the work that you do, introduce the purpose of the meeting / the ask, So for this, just keep in mind that you are the person that's on the ground doing the work to prevent and end youth homelessness in your state. That information is so crucial to your senator or representative to understanding why we're making the ask that we are. So please share about the work that you do and use that to contextualize why we're making the ask that we are. So yeah, just make points in support of your ask with anecdotes based on the work that you're doing. Make a clear ask. You can make it at the beginning, you can make it in the middle, you can make it at the end, but make that clear ask. What are you asking them to do? What is the purpose of the meeting? Thank them for the meeting and tell them you'll follow up. And then if you feel comfortable, grab a picture for social media. That can look like a screenshot if you're meeting virtually. It can look like a meeting or a picture at the end of the meeting if you're meeting in person. We can go ahead to the next slide. Awesome. As I mentioned before, but this part is just so incredibly important. Make sure to have at least one clear ask, whether that be co-sponsorship of legislation, whether that be an ask for more funding for specific programs. Just make sure that you're making at least one clear ask so that the staffer or the congressperson knows, what the purpose of the meeting was. Alrighty. And then after the meeting, we recommend debriefing with your team to discuss how you think the meeting went, what could have gone better, and what are the next steps and who's going to execute those next steps. I think that in terms of next steps, we probably would have the state captain be the person to email to thank the person that they met with and include the materials. That being said, it's up to you as a group to determine who's going to do that follow-up. So once your meetings are scheduled, whether you're a state captain or if you're not a state captain and you're just scheduling your meetings individually, please enter them into this tracker that we have. So we have it state by state for the folks or the states that have people registered in them. And it's just, your name, your email, your state, the members of Congress, the staffer's name, the staffer's email, the outcome of the meeting, and the next steps post the meeting. This way, we just know we have an idea of who has their meeting scheduled. And, in a few weeks, if I see that, for example, Connecticut, if there are no meetings currently listed on here, I might follow up with you just to see if you need help scheduling a meeting or if you ran into trouble. So we will be sharing a report form for you to report back after your meetings. This way we can just know about how the meetings went. Again, see if there was any kind of questions or concerns brought up during the meeting and what priorities you covered during the meeting. You can go ahead. So we will be sharing resources with you for your Hill meetings. And you can also find plenty of resources on our website. All of that being said, I'm here as a resource to help you schedule your meetings. If I haven't connected with you yet, I will. And I'm happy to get the ball rolling in terms of scheduling the meetings if you don't have a state captain. So that will look like me reaching out and making the initial ask for a meeting, and then you'll take on over the communications from there. So yeah, just keep a lookout for emails from me. And yeah, always feel free to reach out if you have any questions. That being said, I'm going to pass it over to Darla.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Heather is going to take over chat. I've been trying to keep up with questions in chat, and I did put the link to our Hill Day resources. Some of the fact sheets will be updated between now and then, but I'll get into that later. I just want to briefly go over just effective advocacy strategies as you're planning for meeting with your elected officials. I didn't include any of the research here, but it shows that effective advocacy engages the heart. So sharing a story, appealing to emotions, influencing a legislator's mind. So providing practical, relatable information to educate them on the issue. Like if you're a McKinney-Vento liaison, numbers of youth experiencing homelessness identified, going up, funding going down, or funding being flat funded in the face of increasing numbers of students. For youth homelessness service providers, maybe you have long wait lists, you're seeing more acute needs, whatever kind of that practical on the ground relatable information is. And then also considering the legislators' political health. Why I would say homelessness is pretty hot topic politically generally. And I think tying the issue of youth homelessness specifically to kind of the broader homelessness narrative, which is very focused on chronically homeless single adults, but talking about the cost to society of not providing services and housing and support to youth experiencing homelessness. What is the cost to that? What is the return on investment in investing in our young people? So those are effective. Another, if people like acronyms like I do, ROAR is another one. So think of research, if there's data that you can bring specific to your state, your community, if possible, outreaching, connecting with others on the community, being clear on getting to know who your policy, maker targets are. Trying to make a connection, with whoever you're meeting to, a personal connection. And then obviously advocating, you're really trying to push a federal policymaker to do something in support of our collective policy agenda, as Heather was saying, the ask. And then building that relationship, making that connection, whether it's personal or professional, maybe some shared life experience or community where you grew up, anything to try to build some type of connection. So that's the quick and dirty on effective advocacy strategies. We have much longer policy trainings, but we got a lot to cover. So we're keeping it rolling here. Sorry, trying to keep track of time. So our current context for US Congress. So each congressional session is 2 years. So basically this session of Congress ends in January of 2025. So all legislation that was introduced in 2022 or before needs to be reintroduced this session. Some has been, some we are in process on. I will get into that later. Democrats control the Senate-ish and the executive branch or the White House. We have 48 Democrats plus the vice president in the Senate, 49 Republicans, and 3 independents that do tend to skew Democratic, and Republicans control the House. So this means that a bipartisan approach is incredibly important to any legislation. Any legislation that is Democrat only or Republican only is not going anywhere in this Congress. So current focus for US Congress, in the House and the Senate, it's pretty much the same. So the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, immigration policy, and then annual appropriations. And all of these, policy conversations and, bills have been introduced, are up for debate. And, depending on what political outlet you read, they're like already dead or on life support, as I think Politico stated this morning. But still a focus, still something that Congress is debating. So our ask for Hill Day 2024 is around the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act. Even though FY 2024 appropriations is not wrapped up, we are expecting a CR for 2024. So it is time to start talking about FY25 appropriations, though you might be a little bit talking about 2024 and 2025 at the same time. So it's a little, welcome to this crazy Congress. You could be talking about 2 fiscal year appropriations at once. So buckle up and prepare for that. And I can talk about that more. And then the Homeless Children and Youth Act. And then we're still working on the low-income housing tax credit student rule fix, which is partially why one of our fact sheets will be updated, because we're going to have a bill introduced next week. So we'll start with the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act of 2023. And I'm starting with this because it is the most viable piece of legislation currently in Congress. And it is the most viable because it's introduced in the Senate and the House with Democratic and Republican champions. None of our other legislation has been introduced in the Senate and the House yet. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, it's celebrating 50 years this year, along with the National Network for Youth. It provides grants directly from federal to local. One grant is for street outreach. One is Basic Center Program, that's short-term housing and supportive services for minors. Transitional Living Program, longer-term housing and supportive services for 16 to 22-year-olds. And then we have National Communication System, National Technical Assistance Center. I'm going to move ahead and then go back. So this is why this is our most viable bill, because it is bipartisan and bicameral. So in October, we had 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans in the House introduce the bill, with a Democrat and a Republican in the Senate. And we now have 2 additional Republicans in the Senate and an additional Democrat in the Senate. And we have 2 additional Republicans in the House and 3 additional Democrats in the House. So that means this is an incredibly bipartisan bill. And it's identical text in the Senate and the House. There was a joint press release done with the Senate and the House. And later on, you'll see there's going to be a congressional briefing in the Senate, actually the day before our summit, where both Senators Durbin and Senator Collins are speaking. So this is the most viable piece of legislation we have. That is not to say there isn't still work to do on other bills, but just flagging why we have this one first. So some of the important things that the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act would do is it would codify into law the non-discrimination clause that's currently only in regulation. And then there's some provisions around training and identification of human trafficking. It would increase the length of stay in basic center programs from 21 days to 30 or longer as state law allows. So if you live in a state where you can be licensed to provide housing and supportive services to minors for 90 days, then once this bill becomes a law, then you could actually use your basic center program for that longer length of stay for minors if needed. It would also increase the grant award amount to up to $250,000 to $275,000 per year. The age for transitional living and maternity group home would actually go to 25. And then there would be a new prevention services program where when you apply for a basic center program, transitional living program, or maternity group home, you could actually apply for an additional $75,000 per year per grant to provide supportive services only for the purpose of preventing youth from needing to access subsidized housing or a TLP. And then also there's this 20 bed per building issue that's popped up in some regions, just depending on who your federal monitor is. This would fix that issue in law, though I do think it is going to be fixed in an IM later on this year, but you didn't hear that from me. And it would also it would specify that youth who are in other systems could be served by RHYA programs if that other system isn't housing them. Right now, some providers are told they can't serve child welfare involved youth or juvenile justice involved youth. This would make it clear, yes, as long as another system isn't housing them or paying for their housing, an RHY provider can absolutely serve them. So that makes that clear. And this is just a short, synopsis of what's in the bill. It's actually quite a bit in the bill. And if you go to our campaign page, you can download a section by section. You can endorse the legislation there, and find a lot more information about the bill. So I've already stated it's bipartisan, bicameral. Bipartisan just means Democrat and Republican. Bicameral just means Senate and House. So that's your word of the day for those of you who may not have heard bicameral for. I know I can talk very DC sometimes, so I try to explain. So the main ask and why we put all these folks up here is if your U.S. senator or U.S. representative is listed here as a champion or a co-sponsor, thank them. Thank them for their leadership. If they are a champion, push them to use their political capital to get this bill moving, right? We need a Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee to co-sponsor this bill before it can be brought for a vote or markup, right? Heather has been working overtime to coordinate all these meetings with RHYA grantees, and most Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee, some aren't quite worth the meeting, but we are close in getting hopefully one Republican co-sponsor. But if Senator Collins were to reach out to her colleague and her fellow caucus and be like, hey, I need you to co-sponsor this so my bill can go up for a vote, then we're in a better position, right? So there's the thanking and then there's the pushing. You can use your political capital to move this bill because every elected official, has their political chits, and we need someone to actually use their 3 chits to actually move our bill. Because in 2022, we lost out Senator Collins to the lobster lobby. It was either a lobster versus whale bill or RHYTPA, and the senator chose the lobster lobby. So all of that is to say things do get political. We are going to be pushing for this bill to get attached to whatever's moving at the end of the year. So just pushing. Even if they are a co-sponsor, if they're not on the bill, ask them to co-sponsor, ask them to join the bill, explain why, whatever, from your expertise, why there needs to be increased funding, changes to the bill, kind of just depending on your orientation to the issue. I will say our champions are trying to keep it pretty even. So like if 10 Democrats in the House want to co-sponsor, Bonamici is going to be like, wait, for some of them, wait till I get on more Republicans, because if you have a bill with like 3 Republicans and 20 Democrats, then it's not looking quite as bipartisan. So just to kind of flag, there is a lot, it's just a real tough time these days. And if there are questions, hopefully Heather's flagging them and we'll get to them. So for FY25, like I said, FY24, we are expecting a continuing resolution. Dysfunctional House of Representatives or not, usually there is a continuing resolution when it's an election year. So a continuing resolution is just copy and paste of what the previous fiscal year budget was. You just basically scratch out FY23, put FY24, and then there's your appropriations bill. We actually consider that a win because that means that our programs wouldn't get cut. They would get flat funded. And there was a potential for all of our domestic programs to getting like 10 to 20% cuts. Now, I don't know if any of you are pursuing an earmark in FY24. Raise your hand if you are. If you made the cut for an FY24 earmark and it is not labor HHS, you may be out of luck. My understanding is that the how it's looking is that then this is the congressionally directed spending, the new earmarks, they rebranded. But labor HHS earmarks are more likely to make it through than any other subcommittee. But if your earmark doesn't make it through and it's a straight CR with no earmarks, there is going to be like an updated process to get you in FY25. So start the conversation. Bring it up. Ask, hey, what should we do? And we are going to be doing a webinar in March about the new earmarks for FY25. So stay tuned for that whenever we pick the date, and we'll be providing more information. And I think we're going to have actually a Senate staffer speak and provide insider intel to you all. So for appropriations, Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, we keep pushing for $300 million for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act program. We have all the ROI. We have found, Heather and I have been having all these meetings with Senate Judiciary Republicans, and they push back on the funding, but then when you give them the return on investment and the cost savings, they really get on, like, they're fine then with like $315 million in the RHYA, RHYTPA bill. So I think we're gonna try to beef up our like ROI fact sheets and talking points, because we have found that to be incredibly effective. But we're continuing to push for $300 million for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act for FY25. Again, FY24, yeah, we'd love an increase, but really just continuing to maintain the same amount is the goal. And then for the U.S. Department of Education, we continue to advocate for the continuation of the $800 million ARP HCYA and the kind of flexible, more flexible uses of funding there. And so that's included in our fact sheet, advocating for the McKinney-Vento Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. I don't know. I need to talk to Barbara if they want us to include anything around extending liquidation, and or if that ship will have already sailed by the time we have our Hill Day. So again, that's why some of these fact sheets might be tweaked. I know conversations are happening actively with Ed now around this. So this might be tweaked a little bit with maybe some report language around kind of extending, the current 800 million. So stay tuned, but everything will be updated on our website, and what we have printed will be updated as well. And then for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, we're continuing to advocate for the Youth Homeless Demonstration Program, $100 million, with no more than $2 million of that for technical assistance. We have a lot of report language requests around this, like maintaining it as a set aside, unlike what they did for round 1 YHDP, where you went back into the competition. But I won't get too into the report language here, but we have quite a bit. And then for emergency solution grants, $300 million. I do think we're going to add $25 million ask for the YESI grants, Youth Homeless System Improvement grants. We might add that request for FY25. I don't know how viable it is, but that is also something we might be adding to THUD appropriations. All right, so Homeless Children and Youth Act. So this is the legislation that would align the different federal definitions of homelessness. Right now, HUD has the most narrow definition, criteria, prioritization, and eligibility. The Homeless Children and Youth Act basically says if you're considered homeless under the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, McKinney-Vento for education, McKinney-Vento Education for Homeless Children and Youth Program, Violence Against Women Act, Healthcare for the Homeless Act, Head Start, basically all those other programs have an aligned definition of homelessness. If you're homeless under another federal definition of homelessness, you would be considered homeless for HUD homelessness assistance funding. It's not a guarantee of prioritization or service, but at least there isn't a question of eligibility. Unlike now, right, where all these different systems are told they need to work together, but they're not operating under the same definition of homelessness. Point 1 of effectively addressing Any social challenge is agreeing to the definition of the social challenge you're all coming together to address. The bill has been introduced in the House, HR 5221. We are bipartisan in our champions. So we had 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats at introduction. And we have, multiple Republicans that have co-sponsored as well as Democrats after introduction. So again, if you're meeting with any of these House reps, they're on here. Say yay, thank you. You can ask for a hearing, ask them to push it, get more folks on the bill. The main issue we have is that our Senate champions are no longer with us. Senator Feinstein has passed away. Senator Portman retired. So we have been working to get new Senate champions. And again, it has to be bipartisan. So we're in conversation. Some folks are kind of close, but they've been dragging their feet for months now. So as you connect with senators, if this is a huge issue that you're seeing, let your senators know we're looking for champions, and if anyone's interested in being a champion on this bill, that's something really important to let Heather and I know in the report back form so we can follow up. And then obviously, if your House representatives are not on this bill, ask them to co-sponsor. So the low-income housing tax credit. So right now, if you're living in affordable housing built with a low-income housing tax credit, you cannot be a full-time student. So we are trying to change that law. So we just found out last week that the House is going to be introducing the Housing for Homeless Students Act next week. So we will have a bipartisan bill in the House with a bill number. So that fact sheet will be updated. And we do not have a Senate bill. Again, our Senator Portman was our champion. He retired. So we have not been able to identify a Republican in the Senate who's willing to introduce the Housing for Homeless Students Act. The other piece, not to make it overly complicated, is the Affordable Housing and Credit Improvement Act is a big LIHTC reauthorization reform bill that's in the House and the Senate, and it does include a fix to the student rule. And and we're part of that coalition, but they're moving pieces of that bill and other things that are moving, but they're never pulling out the student rule because the champions of the Affordable Housing and Credit Improvement Act, I mean, they work for like affordable housing, like builders, right? So like fixing the student rule is not a top 10 priority for them. So that's why for us, yes, we're supportive of that other bill, but like you got to include our stuff. So that's why we're also getting our own bill introduced in the hopes that we can get it attached to some tax bill that will be moving. So anyhow, just a little bit, hopefully not too into the weeds, but I think important to know. So I'm not going to spend time on this, but it can be helpful to know which of your elected officials are on which committees, right? Because committees have the most power over moving a bill. And so again, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act, we are starting with moving it through the Senate because the House is quite dismal, to be honest. And we have much more chance in the Senate because our champion, actually our Democratic champion in the Senate, is chair of the Judiciary Committee. That's not by chance. Obviously, we worked our butt off to get that with our amazing partners in Illinois. So we have met with Cornyn, Grassley, Hawley, Kennedy, Lee, and Tillis's office already. We've coordinated meetings. Grassley is the closest, I think probably followed by Cornyn and Tillis. So just to flag, if you're meeting with any Democrat or Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're especially important in terms of a vote and a markup and co-sponsorship. So I think if we're targeting specific Democrats to join, RHY-TPA, I would probably start with the Senate Judiciary Committee. And then RHY, the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act, goes through House Education and Workforce Committee. Any Republicans on this committee would be amazing, because the chair, Virginia Fox from North Carolina, is just opposed to like spending federal money on human service programs. So is just opposed to basically everything that goes through her committee. So we're not going to get support from the chair, but if we have, you know, as much support from Republicans on committee as possible, then we'll be in a better position to move it, to attach it to a big package. I'm sure you guys want to talk the intricacies of moving bill. But anyhow, so that's kind of where we are there. And then this is appropriations. So when it comes to federal funding and getting increased funding or maintained funding, these elected officials have the most power. And I think most people know, but every spending bill has to originate in the House. So the House Appropriations Committee always moves first on creating any funding bill, any spending bill. It's actually in the Constitution that any bill with money has to originate in the House. The Senate gets around it because they just use dead House bills, but let's not get into that. So if any of these folks are your elected official, then they have the most power, specifically over the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act and McKinney-Vento Education Program, because this is the Labor, Health, and Human Services Education and Related Agencies Subcommittee within the House Committee on Appropriations. And then this is the Senate. So these are the most powerful senators over funding for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, McKinney-Vento Education, and because they're subcommittee members in the Senate Committee on Appropriations. Now, for HUD funding, these are the most powerful members of the Appropriations Committee, because they are subcommittee members over transportation, housing and urban development, and related agencies. So any, YHDP, YHSI, any report language, these folks have the most power in the Senate. And then I don't know if we have the House one. We'll add the House one before we put out the slides, the House Committee on Appropes for THUD. Any questions so far around any of that? Well, I guess I need to get through this. So this is my rah-rah. You all live and vote in your elected officials, districts, states. You can and actually should be telling lawmakers about the issues that are directly impacting you as a young person, or the youth in your community as a service provider or a community member or McKinney-Vento liaison. The folks that you're going to be meeting with on Hill Day, most of them really know nothing about the issue of youth homelessness and haven't really spent much time even thinking about what policies are needed to prevent and end youth and young adult homelessness. So you taking the time to meet, educate, it's invaluable. It's incredibly powerful, much more powerful than Heather and I just meeting with everybody, not as a constituent, without that on the ground expertise. So that's my rah-rah. Like I said, and we're going to be sending out an e-blast once the details are nailed down. But we are doing a Senate congressional briefing the day before the summit. It is at 12:15 p.m. So noon plus 15 minutes Eastern time. It's in person. It will be in the Senate. We don't have a room number yet. It is going to be focused on the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act. 5 members of our National Youth Advisory Council will be speaking, as well as Senators Durbin and Collins. So we'll be sending out a flyer. It's open to the public. Obviously, it's targeted to Senate staffers to try to educate them, increase co-sponsorship, raise awareness, rah-rah, the bill, but it's free, it's open. There will be an RSVP link, but again, we will send that out. And now, questions. Hey, we got through that in pretty good time. Any questions in the chat, Heather?
Previously someone had a good question about virtual state captains
Yeah.
versus in person.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing a final push for virtual registration, and we're just waiting for more folks to come in, and then we will be connecting people by state who are virtual attendees and identifying a state captain if anyone's willing to do it. If any of you are attending virtually and want to be the state captain, please let Heather know. That will save us the time of going through the list and being like, who should we ask? But yes, we'll be doing those coordinating emails, but it can get hard with registration still rolling in and then looping people in. It can become a bit tedious. So I think the goal to do those connecting emails for virtual attendees is next week, right, Heather? Yeah.
Yes, that is the goal. So if you are a virtual attendee, we did not forget about you and we will be reaching out.
And in-person attendees will get the virtual connection to their state captain this week. If we have a state captain for you, we are waiting for a couple of states to get back to us, and then other states, I think 3 states we have Schoolhouse Connection is going to be coordinating. And so we'll follow up there because they're going to be scheduling your Senate meetings, and then they'll accompany you to the meetings if that's helpful. And then other folks, there's just like a couple of people. So Heather's happy to help you schedule your meetings. Sorry, any other questions? Oh yeah, if none of your senators or US representatives are co-sponsoring any of the bills, or on a committee, they're still important. Actually, some of our most powerful champions are not on any committee of importance. They're just incredible champions. Like, for example, Senator Murkowski. She's on no committee that's helpful to us. Well, I guess she is on appropriations, but she's not on any of the subcommittees, but she's an incredible champion. So I think the ask still there is, with those elected officials, it's still about education and it's still about co-sponsorship. And the other thing that any member of Congress can do, whether they're on appropriations committee or not, is every member of Congress actually submits personal requests for increased appropriations for like domestic programs. So for example, when we saw the biggest increases in funding for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act is when Senator Murkowski made it a top 3 personal request. Or when Congressman John Yarmouth made it a top 3 personal request to the Appropriations Committee. So what happens is a senator or a U.S. representative will write a letter to the chair of the Appropriations Committee or ranking. They always talk to their own party, right? So, and they'll say, these are my top 3, increased funding requests to the Appropriations Committee. Maybe they request a 30 million increase and they get 10. But we wouldn't have even got that 10 if it wasn't a personal request. So actually, the more representatives that ask for a 50 million increase to the McKinney-Vento education program, for example, then the much more likely it is we're going to see an increase in FY25 because FY24 is probably going to be a CR. So there's always something your elected officials can do. And like I said, we're still looking for champions in the Senate for the Homeless Children and Youth Act, for the Housing for Homeless Students Act. And it doesn't really, there's committees that are ideal that they're a member of, but it's not required. We need bipartisan support, whether they're on, Senate banking or not, when it comes to the Homeless Children and Youth Act. So hopefully that helped answer that question. Oh, yes.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand. Hi, this is Marty from California. question about Senator Butler. Looking forward to meeting with her. She's relatively new. I guess I have two questions. One, and I know Josh had to drop off, but I'm sure Californians will meet ahead of time. Do we sort of approach conversations with her as like, this is what National Network for Youth is about, and these are like, just sort of like, she's relatively new. And then my second question is, since she's not running for reelection and, you know, there's a big election that will replace her in November, what if we were to convince her to be a champion, does her office, does it stay with her office? So if, you know, Barbara Lee or Katie Porter or Adam Schiff gets elected in November, like what happens to her work around these?
Usually it does, right? So like we got McGarvey on the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking and Prevention Act because he took over Yarmouth's seat, and Yarmouth has been our champion on RHYTPA for like 20 years. This is a little different because Feinstein, you know, the senator passed away. She didn't retire and then have someone elected. So it's a little bit cleaner when it goes from election to election as opposed to kind of this interim. So there is typically kind of a passing of championing. So it might be helpful to remind them that like she was the champion on the, you know, Senator Feinstein was the champion on the Homeless Children and Youth Act. And we hope that, you know, that championship will continue. I think the challenge for us, I mean, just candidly, is the Democrat that took over for, I guess it was Welch in Vermont that took over for Leahy, wanted to become the new Democratic champion of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Trafficking Prevention Act, and they're on the Senate Judiciary Committee. But as someone that's, you know, been advocating for this bill, I kind of passed and I said, no, I actually want the chair of the committee to be our champion, not the freshman I don't want the least powerful Democrat on committee on my bill. I actually want the most powerful Democrat. I'm going to view this as an opportunity. And so did a lot of work with our Illinois champion. So it doesn't always serve us well to have the most junior person championing our issue. So, I mean, that's just kind of a recent example where I just was like, pass. I don't, you know, I need power. Our issues are tough. So any other questions? Sorry, it's hard for me to see chat. Anything else? What else do we even have on this slide deck? Oh, if you're not a member, we'd love to have you become a member. You can learn more online. And then we do have contact information here. We have Heather's email, our phone number, our website. Please email us, contact us. And then I think we do have some poll questions. Heather, can you just like put them out? I don't know if I can do that. Let me stop sharing my screen. Sorry, I got a new computer and I don't know how to use it. That's really what's happening here. I don't know how to stop sharing my screen.
Let me see if I'm able to launch the poll. If you just give me one moment.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any questions that pop up, please email us. Oh, the recording of this and the slides are going to be added to the Hill Day page on our website. So if anybody else from your organizations are coming, you can send them the link. Amazing. You stopped sharing my screen. Thank you. I did not do that.
I think just due to the time, I think maybe we'll send you a poll or form with a poll questions after the webinar. So just keep a lookout for that.
All right. Well, thank you all. Look at us. We're right on time. I was worried we had too much content, but always want to make sure you have all the information you need. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you in real life or virtually in a few weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Keep a lookout for emails from me.